Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. With how good Subtlety rogues are looking heading into the patch 9.2 for raiding and Mythic Plus content, I decided to do an updated Subtlety rogue PvE guide that will be useful to new players picking up rogue for the first time in the patch 9.2, as well as players with previous rogue experience but maybe are looking to improve on your DPS performance. It's a fun playstyle that focuses on burst with a huge emphasis on accuracy and resource management against raid bosses. However, the rigorous single target playstyle is contrasted with an easier to pick up AoE gameplay. And so far, this spec has been performing extremely well in both raids and Mythic Pluses, making it a very competitive choice in this current update. So let's go over everything you need to know to start performing well as a Subtlety rogue for PvE content in the patch 9.2. But right before we get into this class guide, most of you guys watching these videos are still not subscribed. However, the more of you remind, the more of you do. So let's keep it going. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell if you're watching these videos anyway. Especially if you want to see more patch 9.2 guides, content, and updates, as well as future WoW expansion announcements. First, let's talk about everything you need to set up your rogue, starting with the best talents. When it comes to raiding, this is your talent setup, starting with Weapon Master, which provides you the best single target damage output. Shadow Focus, which helps you efficiently manage your energy inside of Shadow Dance windows. Deeper Stratagem is the overall best solid choice for the most amount of damage that lets you use your combo points more efficiently, with Cheat Death generally being the best choice when it comes to survivability in all PvE content. Your level 40 talent row is honestly a personal choice, as this row deals with small crowd control utility that you bring into PvE content. Enveloping Shadows will be your best option for overall damage in all content. And Master of Shadows ends up offering the most energy regeneration for single target boss fights. For Mythic Plus, we change things up a little bit, mostly with Premeditation, which makes it easier for you to maintain Slice and Dice. This is a better choice in AoE situations where you won't get as much benefit from Weapon Master talent. And Shuriken Tornado in the final row as a fantastic tool for AoE and cleave situations. Even though this talent is pretty difficult to play with at first, it does offer you the best damage output. When it comes to Covenants, there are honestly two most recommended options that Subtlety gets to pick between. Venthyr is a very solid, well-rounded Covenant for all kinds of content. It is specifically good in Mythic Plus situations, but it's also excellent in single target as well. The Kyrian Covenant is another excellent choice, as it really amps up your single target damage output. While this Covenant loses out on M+ content and AoE situations, it greatly increases your performance in a one-on-one boss fights. The other Covenants of Necrolord and Night Fae aren't normally recommended by most rogues. However, don't let that stop you from trying those Covenants out and experimenting with different playstyles. The Necrolord Covenant generally offers all classes more survivability with the Fleshcraft ability, which can make any class far more durable. And Necrolord does have the focus of cleave damage that Subtlety may lack thanks to the Bone Spike Bleed playstyle. The Night Fae Covenant ability of Sepsis offers a huge chunk of damage inside of single target situations, and Soul Shape is fantastic if you're a player who values mobility above the rest. Next, let's talk about your Conduits and Soulbinds. If you choose to play Venthyr, the Soulbinds that will fit you best will be Theotar. When playing Theotar, you'll play him with the Lash and Scars, Deeper Daggers, and Stiletto Staccata Conduits. Lash and Scars buffs the Venthyr Rogue Covenant ability, and it is the best choice for all content. Deeper Daggers buffs the shadow damage your rogue does, which results in the best damage for dungeons and raids. Stiletto Staccata Conduit adds cooldown reduction to your Shadow Blades, which further empowers your playstyle with more damage as well as a faster paced gameplay. However, if you choose to play the Kyrian Soulbind with Mechanicos, you'll play it with Deeper, Stiletto, and either a choice of Planned Execution, which is the best in AoE content, or Perforated Veins in pure single target scenarios. For now, in patch 9.2, it is best to use either the Kyrian or the Venthyr Legendaries while we're still rocking a single Legendary. However, over the next few weeks, we'll unlock the double legendary potential for all of our classes. With double legendaries, we get our Covenant legendary for free, which lets us run another class legendary on top of it. The best class legendary for subtlety in single target encounters will be Akari's. This legendary will be fantastic for pure damage, but it also has a great synergy with your 2-piece and 4-piece tier set bonuses. And in Mythic Plus dungeons or AoE content, the best legendary subtlety can use will be Finality together with your Covenant legendary effect. Now that your Subtlety Rogue is set up, let's talk about the gameplay and the rotation. Subtlety Rogue is a very CD-focused spec. It focuses on keeping abilities on cooldown as much as possible throughout a fight, while trying to line up certain cooldowns together to increase their damage output. You should try to use Shadow Blades, Symbols of Death, and Vanish on cooldown as often as possible throughout a boss or a dungeon encounter. Every 30 seconds, you want to put Symbols of Death on cooldown and put up as much damage as you can into the boss or a dungeon fight. You should always pair Shadow Dance charges together with Symbols of Death whenever possible. Shadow Dance as a cooldown should almost never be used by itself. It should always be paired with Symbols of Death unless you are about to overcap on Shadow Dance charges. Now let's talk about the basics of your rotation. Subtlety Rogue is a spec that generates combo points and then spends them on buffs, debuffs, and damaging abilities. This spec has, in a way, two different rotations, inside of Shadow Dance windows and outside of Shadow Dance windows. Outside of Shadow Dance window, you'll be using the ability of Backstep to generate combo points in single target. If you are ever fighting more than one target, you should always switch to Shuriken Storm on 2 or more targets. Shuriken Storm generates a combo point for every target hit, which will make maintaining Slice and Dice and Rupture easier. Your rotation changes slightly whenever the rogue is inside of their Shadow Dance window, which allows them access to stealth-based abilities. Inside of Shadow Dance on single target or 2 target fights, you'll be using Shadow Strike, which does more damage and generates more combo points. If you are ever fighting 3 or more targets, you'll be swapping to Shuriken Storm inside of your Shadow Dance windows. After you generate some combo points, you then have to spend them. The buff of Slice and Dice will consume your combo points and should be up at all times. This buff not only gives you faster attack speed, which is huge for PvE content, but also gives you more procs of shadow techniques, which can grant you more energy and combo points on auto attack hits. You should also try to maintain Rupture constantly on your primary target. This ability puts a bleed that does good damage over time. It will last longer per combo point consumed. When you have combo points but don't need to refresh Slice and Dice or Rupture, you can use your combo points on Eviscerate for single target fights or Black Powder in certain AoE situations. With those basics in mind, the gameplay of Subtlety generally revolves around Symbols of Death windows. Every 30 seconds, you want to use Symbols of Death and Shadow Dance to do as much damage to the enemy target as possible, whether using Shadow Strikes or Shuriken Storms to generate combo points, and trying to mostly consume your combo points into Eviscerates or Black Powder. Ideally, you want to maintain Slice and Dice and refresh Rupture outside of your Shadow Dance windows, where inside of your Shadow Dance windows, you want to focus on damage with Eviscerates and Black Powder. You will occasionally have to refresh Slice and Dice or Rupture inside of your Shadow Dance windows, but you want to try to keep those buffs and debuffs rolling ahead of time and plan for Shadow Dance windows accordingly. Your rotation changes slightly on 3 targets. On 3 targets, you want to maintain Rupture on all 3 targets. Keep maintaining Slice and Dice, and you can use Black Powder on 3 or more targets as a finisher, or use Eviscerate if a priority target is present. Your rotations further changes slightly on 5 or more targets. At 5 or more targets, you should stop reapplying Rupture. When you're fighting 6 or more enemies, you should stop reapplying Slice and Dice. Instead, spend all of your combo points on either Black Powder or Eviscerate if there's a priority target in an AoE situation that needs to be taken down as soon as possible. As for the Covenant abilities, the Carrion ability of Echo and Reprimand is best used outside of Shadow Dance windows. It's also best to spend the Carrion Anima Charge combo points outside of Shadow Dance windows, since your combo point generation will be a bit more consistent. With the Venthyr Covenant, it's best to use the Venthyr Flagellation ability right before a finisher and inside of your Symbols and Shadow Dance windows. Having a strong opener is very important for Subtlety rogues as it establishes your buffs, debuffs, and lets you easier transition into your damaging rotation. As a Kyrian Subtlety rogue, you'll open up with the Shadow Strike from Stealth, establish Slice and Dice, hit Shadow Blades, hit Echoing Kyrian ability into a Rupture, then you continue into Shadow Dance Burst window. As a Venthyr Subtlety rogue, you start out in Stealth with a Shadow Strike, then use combo points into a Slice and Dice, pop Shadow Dance and sink 2 Shadow Strikes into your target. Follow that up with Flagellation, Shadow Blades, Symbols of Death into a Rupture, then continue into your Shadow Dance Burst rotation. When it comes to gearing your rogue in patch 9.2, it is best to invest into figuring out how sims work. It's a lot easier to maintain your character when you utilize sims, especially if you decide to get a little bit more serious with World of Warcraft PvE content and gearing. I have a link in the description to a World of Warcraft sim guide. But if you want the easy version on how to gear your rogue, we will cover it in this video as well. The best gear for Subtlety rogue going forward will be gear with stats like Critical Strike and Versatility. Haste is your worst secondary stat, so you should try to avoid it as best as possible. When it comes to best rogue trinkets, those can change in a moment's notice, as Blizzard is continuing to tune and shift things in the patch 9.2. This is why in the description I have a link to the best simming rogue trinkets for you guys to check out. This link will continue to update the best rogue trinkets as more buffs and nerfs happen over the next few weeks. You can always sim different trinkets for your rogue if you know how to sim your character. Finally, when it comes to gear, let's talk about tier sets. The tier set for Subtlety rogue will be obtainable right now from the raid of patch 9.2. You can also get different tier set bonuses by filling out your Great Vault, and at a later time, you'll be able to use the Creation Catalyst to craft tier sets in the future. The Subtlety rogue tier set doesn't change your rotation too much. It simply amps up your Shadow Blades uptime, and with the 4-piece bonus, you can also randomly Shadow Strike multiple nearby enemies whenever you use a finisher. Those Shadow Strikes will generate you more combo points, which will let you chain finishers back to back to back. This tier set bonus is very powerful, and if you consider playing your Subtlety rogue seriously, you should try to get your tier set bonus as soon as possible. Next, we have all the consumables you need for your rogue in Mythic Plus and raiding encounters. However, consumables can be quite expensive depending on your server or depending your gold situation. So let's first talk about the most important and impactful consumables, and then talk about all the other side buffs that will help you damage output. The 2 most important consumables you should manage as a rogue will be the Spectral Flask of Power and Shaded Sharpening Stones. The Spectral Flask of Power offers you the biggest damage increase and performance output gain for the amount of gold spent. It should be a #1 priority to secure a flask the next time you tackle a challenging raid boss or try to push some Mythic Plus dungeons. Shaded Sharpening Stones takes the #2 spot of the most impactful consumable that a Subtlety rogue can use for better PvE performance. Shaded Sharpening Stones compared to Flasks of Power are a lot less expensive on most auction houses, and you should definitely carry those for your next dungeon or raid run. The rest of the consumables will really depend on your financial gold situation, but if you're looking to push the content and are willing to spend the extra gold, then the Potion of Spectral Agility will offer you the biggest damage increase output. You should also feast up with the Feast of Gluttonous Hedonism, but if you can't afford it, Stake a la Mode is a solid, cheaper alternative. And if you have some spare gold, Veiled Augment Runes can also go a long way in increasing your damage performance. You should also enchant your weapons with Sinful Revelation and Celestial Guidance. Enchant your boots with Eternal Agility. Your chest should be enchanted with Eternal Stats. And you should enchant your cloak with Fortified Leech. It's also advised to use an armor kit on your chest piece for better survivability. You should consider enchanting your rings with either the Tenet of Critical Strike or Tenet of Versatility. You generally want versatility and critical strike in equal amounts, so if you have too much critical strike, enchant with versatility, or the other way around. The same theory applies when you gem your character. whether you use deadly jewel cluster or versatile jewel clusters. Besides all that, this is everything you need to know to pick up your Subtlety Rogue for the patch 9.2. This is a very fun spec that's also difficult to master. However, it's very rewarding once you can get around its cooldowns and resource management. Subtlety should be a fantastic spec for the patch 9.2. It has had an incredible good start and will likely only get stronger unless Blizzard ends up nerfing it out of the blue. Thank you guys so much for checking out this guide video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts on this guide in the comments below. If you guys enjoyed this video or found it informative, give it a thumbs up. I would very much appreciate it. And if you have any more questions on Subtlety Rogues in PvE, feel free to hit me up directly in the description of every video and live stream. We have a link to our Discord community channel. Probably the best place to reach out to me directly. DMs are always open, but if you watch these videos on the regular, you guys should consider joining the Discord to join our community. But otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in another one.